good news, that God wanted to redeem them, that God wanted to bring them back, that God wanted once again this full fellowship and relationship with his people. Just like it was in the garden, just like it was in Eden. What kind of message are they sending? Well, they're certainly not sending that one, are they? They can't get along with each other. They're fighting with one another. They're at each other's throat. They're even worshiping other gods. God wanted his people to be blessed so that they would be drawn to him. But that's not happening. The nation rebelled from God. They became complacent in their devotion to him. They became disobedient to his commands. They began to worship all of these pagan idols. Now remember, one of the parts that we had a little difficulty with was when they came into the promised land, it says, now put away all of the people and all of their possessions and all of their things. Get them out of the country. I said, well, wait a minute. That doesn't sound like a loving God. Until you look at the top story, does it? God's saying, wait a minute. I need a people that are pure. I need a people that will worship me and me alone. I need a people that are solely mine, that are not going to slip back into all these bad habits. Any of you have a bad habit? I don't want to know what it is. And if you've got a bad habit, you know that if you leave the thing around the house that you are habitually drawn to, that temptation becomes very strong, doesn't it? And even though you've said in your mind, I don't want that thing, you keep getting drawn back. Well, so it was with the people of God. They kept getting drawn back to all of these things that were there. And even though they were told to put away all of these idols, all of these people that they'd come to know and to love kept bringing them back. Saying, really, what could it hurt? If God is so great, how come he can't put up with a little competition? How come he can't put up with our God? Maybe we ought to be more tolerant. Ever heard that? That's not what God called the people to be. He didn't say, I want tolerant people. I don't want you to put up with all of these things. He said, I want you to be my people, and I want to be your God. And together, we will change the world again. We will make it over into thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, God would be once again in control. So dividing them was once again God's movement back toward trying to purify his people. But sin has a way of really digging its roots down, doesn't it? Ever been out in the yard trying to pull out dandelions? You pull them out and you get this root about this long. Ha! Boy, I got that thing now. It's not going to come back now. Next week when you go to mow the lawn, there it is again. Why? Because that root is so down far. It is way in the earth. Sin is so down far in our lives that it's hard to pull it out on our own. Later on, only God extricates that sin, and he does it in a very unlikely way by having his son sacrifice his own life. So this northern kingdom, Israel, I want to focus on that more this week because next week we're going to look a little more at the southern kingdom, Judah. As you came in this morning, you got a timeline. Or you should have. It'll give you an idea of where we're at in the story. And you can see there's some overlap between the north and the south, the kingdoms. And this is probably the point in time when you're reading, particularly if you're going back to the Bible and you're reading it from there, that you begin to get a little bit confused. when it starts talking about, and Jeroboam in Israel, and then Rehoboam in Judah, and Elijah, and then Elisha, and then all of these different prophets that come in. After a while, your head wants to split, and you say, where are we at? I can't figure this one out. Well, hopefully the timeline, which is there, will help you put some ideas to where we're at in the story. The other is just kind of a pastoral letter from Randy Frazee, who helped write some of the material. And I thought the stories were pretty good in that this week, so that's why you have the other side of the page. We want to look at the period of time when God sent 9 prophets to 19 kings in Israel. Now, sometimes the question comes up, how long of a period of time is that? 208 years. Because somebody asked me that a couple different weeks in a row, and I had to say, I don't know, I'll have to look it up. That's why you're getting 208 years this week. Okay? Looked it up. And the only prophet in the northern kingdom that ever was heard completely was the prophet Jonah. And he didn't even go back to the people of God, did he? He was sent to the Ninevites. He was sent to an entirely different people. So it makes you wonder how good of a connection they actually had, whether they were actually listening or whether they let the thing go to voicemail. There were 38 kings over Israel and Judah, and only 5 in our entire story are classified as good. Now, if you go through and you read these couple chapters, 15 to 19 in 2 Kings, what you're going to see is in the section under Israel, it says, and this king did what was evil in the sight of God. And then he was replaced by this king. And that one did what was evil in the sight of God. And he was replaced by this king, and he did evil in the sight of God. And it goes on and on and on. Not a good track record. Not where God wanted them to be. This is not what God was intending for all of us. And then in the year 722, if you look down your timeline, you'll see something happens. Israel ends. It's carried away. Now, all of the people of God are dispersed among all the other nations, but particularly into Assyria. And they are no more. From 722 on, they cease to exist. Only 2 of the 9 prophets are we going to look at this morning. One is Elijah, which you saw a little bit about this morning, which Pete shared with you this morning. I love that story in Elijah. Elijah and the prophets of Baal. Probably one of my favorite in the Old Testament. Story very quickly has a showdown with particularly Jezebel and Ahab. I don't know why, but every time I hear that word King Ahab, I think of Ahab the sailor with Moby Dick and coming against the whale. Well, that's kind of where Elijah was at with this whole thing too. He's coming against a big whale of a nation, a whale of a king. And I think as Pete so eloquently described, it's like having this huge arena where all of the people in the nation are surrounding you, and you are the lone New England Patriot in a Colts stadium. No, you are Elijah against all of the prophets of Baal. And all of the people of Israel are there surrounding you. And they're rooting for the prophets of Baal. So Elijah's pretty outnumbered, right? Well, unless you know a little secret. The only one that Elijah's got on his side is God. Now, if you have to go to battle by yourself, that's not a bad ally to have. Have God on your side. Then no matter how many are out here, you win. That's cool. That's the way it ought to be for us in Christ.